In this video, we're going to start with exercise 1 from section 1.1, which is on page 13 of your class notes booklet. And we're going to continue with the same function that we worked with in example 1 from the last video. P is equal to g of t, which is how you say that. G, if you remember, is the name, t is the independent variable, and p is the dependent variable. T is also known as the input and p the output. And if you remember, we had p is equal to 5,000 plus 250t, which is the same thing as g of t. So what they're asking you to do in this exercise is evaluate g of 6. I'll go ahead, if you want to pause it and try it, but I'll go ahead and just give you an example of how to do g of 6 if you're not sure. So what you're going to do, 6 is the input, it's the t. So I'm going to just plug in a 6 there. 5,000 plus 250 parentheses times 6, which is 5,000 plus 1,500, which is equal to 6,500. So see if you can now go and find g of 2.5. If you've already done so, continue on. If you haven't, pause before you continue on. Okay, here's the answer. G of 2.5, again, that's the input, that's the t. So I plugged it in for the t, and I multiplied these first, then added. Hopefully you got 5,625. Part B. Given the statement g of 10 equals 7,500, give the units of the 10 and the units of the 7,500. You might have to look on the page before to figure out what the units of each of these were. If you remember, t was the time after the year 2000, and p was the population of a certain town. So go ahead and see if you can figure out what the units for 10, which one is the 10, and which one is the 7,500. Okay, here's the answer. So we know that the population was 7,500, so that would be, the units would be the number of people after 10 years. The units of 10 are in years. Part C, solve the equation g of t equals 5,500. How would you do this? Well, I'm going to plug in 5,500 now for the output. This is now the output because it's g of t equals, so it looks like the p, isn't it? So this means that the p is 5,500. What is the t? So if I plug in 5,500 in for the p here, I can get an equation that I can solve. We learned how to solve that in the last section. What we're going to do is we're going to subtract, since it says add, and I always do the subtraction first. And then I get 500 equals 250t. I'm going to divide both sides by 250. So t is equal to 2, which if we look at the page before, you'll notice the chart. When t is 2, the population was 5,500. So it does work. Okay, so we've done that together. So now go ahead and do the same thing for exercise 2. The only thing different about exercise 2 is they're giving you the formula first instead of the words. So a headphone company sells S, so S represents the sales in dollars, where they charge P represents what they charge for each pair of headphones. And it's given by this formula. Do as much as you can, A, B, C, and come back when you get stuck or you're finished. What did you get as the independent variable? Hopefully it was P is the correct answer. And then you would say the dependent variable is the S, and F is just the name. Use a calculator to evaluate F of 50 and F of 100. Plugging F of 50 into this formula. 50 where there ever is a P, and you can just use your calculator. Hopefully you get 9,500. If you're using the TI 83 or 84, you can just plug it in exactly like it's shown. 250 with parentheses minus 50, and don't forget to get that little square there. I press this little, what they call a caret, to get that exponent, or you can hit this square. Then you press enter, and you'll get the answer. Plugging in 100, hopefully you got 14,000 is the correct answer. It says to include units. We should do that first. What are the units? Well, again, let's see. That would be the output, the S, and the S is sales in dollars. So if you just add a little dollar there, that includes the units. It says discuss with your group what each answer tells you about the headphones and money. Well, we're doing this class remotely, so we're not in groups. So let's go ahead and discuss this over the video. What does that mean? So let's see, what does the P represent again? So again, this is the P. This one tells me that the P is 50 and the S is 9500. This means what? So P is how much they charge. So if they charge $50 for each pair of headphones, the company's sales are going to be $9,500. Or you can say it the other way around. The company's sales are going to be $9,500 when they charge $50 for each headphone. So similarly, the second one means that the company's sales are going to be $14,000 when they charge $100 for each headphone, or when each headphone costs $100. So we've already figured out, by the way, 9,500 and 14,000. You can go ahead and try to fill out the rest. When you're done, come back. Here are the correct answers. Plugging in 150, plugging in 0, you just get 0, but plugging in 150, plugging in the 200 and 240. Were you surprised these went down? You would think that the more they charge, the more that they make. Well, maybe if they charge too much money here, or maybe not enough people are buying them. I don't know. To graph it. The graph on this one is kind of set up for you. So go ahead and plot these points and see if you can get a graph. That might take you some time. So pause, come back when you're ready. Okay, here's the answer. On this one, I went ahead because it was not a straight line and graphed all my points. And hopefully, it's hard to see what the shape is. But it's going to do something like this, and then it's going to turn at some point. Not sure where it's going to turn, but that's kind of the idea. We're going to study this in a whole chapter in the future. It's called a parabola, but that is the graph. We are going to learn how to do this on our calculator. If you want to learn how to use the fancy new TI 8384 calculator, I do have a video that shows how to do this, but I'll go ahead and do this one. Here are the steps. So what you're first going to do is you're going to go to y equals on your calculator. It's on the top left row. And then you're going to type in your formula. If you remember from above, your formula was 240 p minus p squared. Well, they don't have a variable, so you're going to look for this key here, x theta t, or xt theta actually, and both of those. And then you're going to hit the minus key, and then you're going to hit it again for the second time, and then the square for the square button to look like this. They don't have p's, so it's just an x. Then you're going to click on Window, and you're going to type in the window that best represents what we graphed. If you remember, this right here is what they consider the x, and the y is the vertical axis. So when they're talking about x min, they're talking about the x. So it looks like we want to go from 0 to 250. So you just type that in there. And then y, go from 0 to 15,000. Otherwise, you're not going to see your graph. You're only going to see from negative 10 to 10. It'll only be a little bit. So we need to see this whole thing. And that's mainly what's important. But what the x scale and the y scale is notice how this is by 50. So I chose 50. It's how many increments you're counting by. And this one is by 5,000. So I put a 5,000 here. So it looked just like it. And then once you've gone to Window, and Window, by the way, is on the top row. On the top row on the right, there's a graph. You're going to go to this button right there. And you should get a nice graph. And each of the tick marks on the y-axis or the vertical axis represents the 15,000, and the horizontal represents the 250. Last question. What are the values of p that make s 0? If you look up here at the graph, it looks like it's both 0 and 240. So s would equal 0 and s would equal 240. These are, by the way, called the p-intercepts, or sometimes called the horizontal intercepts. So now let's go ahead and turn the page and start on page 14 and do the exercise there. Exercise 3 has a new question. There's a new function, and they want you to evaluate the following. So go ahead, pause this, see if you understand what f of 3, f of negative 2, f of h, and f of 1 plus h means when f of x is equal to 3x plus 4. When you're ready, come back. Okay, here's the answers. Well, let's do the first one together. It should be 3 times 3. Plugging in, this is the input. And the input is the x. So 9 plus 4, 13. What is negative 2? If you got this correct, then move on. If you didn't, pause again just to retry f of negative 2. Okay, the answer is negative 2. Plugging in negative 2 in for the x, you would multiply negative 6 plus 4, which is negative 2. What about h? That would be 3h. Again, plugging in for the h. What about 1 plus h? If you got this correctly, move on to the video to see 1 plus h. But if you didn't, pause it again and retry it. It is, instead of an x, you plus a 1 plus h. So it's 3 parentheses 1 plus h plus 4, which, by the way, is 3h plus 3, 3 plus 3h using the distributive property, and I can combine like terms. There it is.